Okay, so here's another interesting project. Which, this is another one off of the back burner. And this one is quite old and quite dusty. And funny enough, it's actually something that I might actually be able to get to work. It's just a question of whether it's worth the trouble or not. So, what this is this is the mechanism out of a Northern Tool store brand flux-core welder. This is the wire feed mechanism. This, of course, is the end of the actual stinger. This is the original spool holder. And these are the control electronics and the step-down transformer that powers the control electronics. And this right here is the bottom fraction of a very old 90s toy. People who are into Nerf history might recognize this. This was one of the Vortex toy blasters. And these, rather than shooting darts like most of your modern Nerf guns, these had these spring-loaded launchers for rubber rings about that big around, and the spring-loaded launchers would push the rings and give them a spin. And so you'd get this spinning ring that would then fly out some distance. They were never very popular, but I had one, and it was really cool looking. And just kind of kept it around because I have all kinds of Nerf guns. That's kind of what I did when I was a little kid. But the main difference, and y'all pistol brace guys with your ARs probably know exactly what this design is for. Now, what I'm trying to make out of this, you'll notice this was cut out of a piece of 10 gauge steel plate. I put a switch in it and ran the cables back. This is basically modifying it into a spool gun. Now, for those who don't know, when you're welding, you have a spool of wire which is fed down a long Bowden tube, it's kind of a spring tube. It's a tube that allows you to push a piece of wire up the tube. Like pushing a rope. Well, that's how you do it. And eventually it comes up to a gun, comes out the end of the gun. Actually, hold on just a second. There we go. One example's worth a lifetime of babbling. This is a newer welder, but the same thing. Basically, the wire gets pushed up this, comes out here, if it will focus. That would be great. There we go. Comes out here, and it feeds metal and electricity into the weld. So, the principle there, pushing a rope, you can imagine that gets to be a bit of a problem sometimes. Now, most of the time, if everything is fairly clean, fairly well kept, it's not a problem for steel wire. Now, you start running into problems, though, if you want to weld aluminum. Aluminum wires tend to not be rigid enough to get fed all the way up a tube like that. If you're careful, you don't put any kinks in it, you keep it in good working order, you can get away with it most of the time until you can't, and then it balls itself up inside. Ask me how I know. The solution, of course, is to shorten that path, and you can't get a whole lot shorter than a spool gun. In a spool gun, you actually mount your spool of wire right here, right next to the thing that's doing the pushing, right next to where the wire comes out to do the weld. And this thing right here is one of my early project successes because this thing actually worked. I've got a picture that I've used for my avatar in many, many places of me actually using this thing. And Originally, it was just with a no gas, no nothing. It was just the little buzzbox welder, had a transformer, which is actually probably around here somewhere. But I need more than heat settings of high and low. Yeah, that's how it was. High, low. And so my plan was to take this successful project, take it apart, and put this part that works and hook it up to another welder, like for instance, that clutch I've got over there. Now, you might be asking, well, they make spool guns. They're like $100. What on earth are you on about? Well, the biggest difference between my setup and all the others, all of the other ones that I have seen, are ergonomically horrible. They are awful. I hate them. They have a straight up and down stalk right here. This thing's hanging off the side trying to pull your grip away. The thing is heavy and awful and awkward, and the wire hangs off the back of it. It's a pain in the ass. With this, I put the wire out the bottom underneath your hand, and the weight of that spool sits on your wrist because of the wonderful Nerf gun ergonomic design here. Sits like this, you pull the trigger, and it comes out. This is very easy to handle compared to any spool gun I have ever seen. I have no idea why companies don't do it that way, but this is the world we live in. So, anyway, that was the plan, because realistically, there's like nothing here. You can see there are 4 wires. They're all right here out in the open. You can see them. 2 go to this switch, which switch this on and off, and 2 go to the electric motor, which I've capped off to keep dust off of it. I didn't really make any enclosure for this, and I figured that if you ever had a spool gun, you would see, and let me go back to the clutch welder. All right, I don't know how well this will show, but where you're, there we go. We have 5 wires there, which I presumed would be 2 wires for the trigger, 2 wires for the motor. And the problem is poking around at that thing with the multimeter, I could not get anything besides just the 2 wires I need for the trigger, and that's it. No power coming out of that, as far as I could tell, for spinning the motor on a spool gun. Couldn't tell if there was some weird signaling going on, whatever. Something weird. I couldn't figure it out. And so this is kind of languished. One thing that I'm considering doing is just knuckling down and figuring this the fuck out one way or another. Make a pigtail for that so that I can watch all 5 wires at once, try and figure out what the fuck is going on. But since I got this machine here, this Lincoln Idealarc, I had another idea. So, welding tangent. When you are welding with whether a wire feed welder, whether it's MIG, which is solid wire and a shielding gas. Oh, and that's another thing I was going to add to this with shielding gas. But whether you're welding with a shielded solid wire, MIG with a shielding gas, solid wire, or if you're using flux-core wire, either with or without shielding gas. Now, flux-core, basically the wire is a tube with flux inside of it that keeps oxides from attacking the weld. Regardless, you want a constant voltage power supply for that welding. You want it to stay at a certain voltage. That way, you get good consistent results at the weld puddle, because as the wire makes and breaks contact with the puddle that makes contact with the weld puddle, you need heat to melt that wire. And as it breaks contact, you don't need so much current, you need to get more wire in there. And so on, it kind of self-regulates that way. Or that's the 30-second version. No, that's not exactly correct, but it's as close as you need to know. You can, however, use one of these with a constant current power supply like you would use for stick welding or TIG welding, which is what this Idealarc can do. What you need, however, is called a voltage sensing wire feeder. Now, the way that I understand it is basically a board that goes between the constant current supply work ground as well as controlling the motor speed here, and it modulates the motor speed of this in order to keep a particular voltage on the line. I think. I'm not 100% sure. Now, I know that these aren't actually like, I know that that welds made with a voltage sensing wire feeder, they also call those a briefcase welder, though they also call little ones like that a briefcase welder, but in the trade, a briefcase welder is generally a wire feed unit that goes to one of those. And the thing that kind of got me thinking about this is that sounds like a task for like a development board, like an Arduino or something like that, one of these small electrical things. Get rid of all this shit, make a new board that hooks up here and hooks up to this and will allow me to run aluminum with my spool gun, with my high amperage. This will go up to, I think, 225 amps, I think, because also welding aluminum takes a lot more current than welding steel because of its thermal conductivity. That's kind of my idea for this in the because I was thinking of just getting it working again, but I think that's a lot more interesting. But like I said, this one is another backburnered project for now. Once again, if y'all are interested in this, I might just hop on this thing and start blasting it out, because all of these are solved problems. I'm not blazing any new ground except in ergonomics, because damn if that doesn't feel good. Like, it really does. I can't convey to you like how much of a crime it is that none of the other of these that companies make feel this good. So anyway, that is the spool gun project. If y'all want to see some more of that, let me know. Otherwise, I'll get to it. I'm sure I'll get to it. I'll get to it just like I'll get to all the rest of this stuff. Yep, absolutely.